So let me just introduce Doug
Sounds great.
to those of you who don't know him as well as Sharon, who reached out and arranged for him to speak today. North Shore Academy, a North Shore area educator and a clinical psychologist. I think most of your career has been in the North Shore working with students and teachers and academics in general. And I think now you have a private practice, if I understand that correctly. And again, the topic today is myths that undermine child well-being. I'm not sure if that applies to from 3 to as old as my children are, but I think it does. And so I think we'll find something applicable for everyone. So welcome, Doug. And thank you again. The mental health series is Mental Health Mondays. It's the first Monday of the month at noon. And as Jillian said, all the sessions are recorded, so you can go back, tell your friends, rewatch, or whatever suits your pleasure. So thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Mary. And this is a bit of a misnomer. It's going to have to be myth that undermines child well-being. I thought I had more time when I said myths, so I'm going to do the one that I think is most challenging for us. And one of the things that I so appreciate about this is that certainly our kids are in crisis from a mental health perspective, and the thing that we often forget is that the mental health crisis was already an epidemic prior to COVID. In the decade before COVID, rates of depression rose more than 60%. And the number of kids and teenagers who were seen in emergency rooms with suicidal thoughts or attempts doubled in that decade. And here's the thing that as an educator was most stunning and frightening to me, actually, is that the suicide rate for children is 2 times higher when school is in session. And if we take a look, once I saw this graph, I couldn't unsee it. These are emergency room visits by week, for mental health emergency room visits by week. And if you take a look at this, the contours of this representation go along exactly with the school calendar. If you take a look, the week ending January 5th at the far left, what is that? That's the last week of winter break. And then it rises precipitously, peaking on May 11th, which is often our finals week, plummeting during the summer. And then there it goes straight back up in August and September, and even a few days off for Thanksgiving. Take a look at the week ending November 30th. Just a few days off gives kids relief. And then all of a sudden, it goes right back up again during finals week and plummets. And so what we know, this is the challenge for us, is that there's something about our schools that's pushing kids to the edge of their ability to cope, and for some of them beyond that. And in September of 2019, especially for those of us on the North Shore, this is a finding that I think everybody should be thinking about. Students in high-achieving schools, every school on the North Shore, just attending these schools puts kids at risk. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation named the top environmental conditions harming adolescent wellness, and we knew the first 3, poverty, trauma, and discrimination. But then there it is, this excessive pressure to excel. Children in high-achieving schools suffer significantly higher rates of anxiety and depression, and substance abuse, 3 to 7 times the national average. And so suddenly we began realizing that not only is school a place of dramatic stress for kids who traditionally struggle more, but now the kids who are seen as the kids who are the leaders in our communities, suddenly we're seeing significant mental health problems. If we had these mental health issues because of something in the water in our pipes, we wouldn't hesitate to shut everything down and pull the pipes up. And yet here we are, we're all a part of this system. And I like what this business consultant W. Edwards Deming said: every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. And so we're part of a system that creates this. And as an educator, the reason why I love talking to other educators about this work is because we are a part of the system, and we're not only a part of what's happening, but we can also be a part of solving it. And there's one myth that I really want to talk about today that I think undermines a lot of this. And that is that selective schools are better for our kids. So that's the myth I want to dive into, because it's hard to find somebody who doesn't think that, and especially on our North Shore school systems, people are all gearing towards where do you go to college? And the more selective, the better, right? And I guess I want to just see what the research and data says. But at some level, and I think we all believe in this at some level, that in order for our child to be happy and successful, they need to have a high income, which means they have to have a prestigious job, which means they need to go to an elite school to get that, which means they've got to fill their lives with extracurricular activities and AP classes in high school. But in order to get to those, you've got to excel in the lower grades. And in order to do that, you've got to get all of your skills up before you step into kindergarten. So we get kids into elite preschools. And even I can still remember when kids are in utero, or we had baby Einstein back in the day, trying to make sure that, oh, we're gonna stimulate these brains. So today I just want to focus on the elite college, but there's a lot of different places where all of this this is a house of cards that begins to crumble when you take a look at both the research, but also the impact. At some level, from very early ages, we start to create our child's resume. And the resume can be how many travel teams they're on. It can be whether or not they are in this special symphony, or they go to this dancing recital. But when I'd go to, when my kids were 7 and 8, I can still remember, people would say, what do I do for my job? But then they'd say, what do your kids do? And it's almost like we've got to have a resume, right? Oh, well, they're on travel hockey, and they are, they're CIT at this prestigious camp, whatever it may be. But we're trying to always say, oh, this is what my child has achieved. And at some level, we believe that the ticket to success is an elite university. So let's take a look and see what I just want to take a look at what are so this is maybe the data may be a little bit old, but I think still rings true. But in 2014, if you took a look at the top 10 grossing revenues, the CEOs, only one of them was an elite college, so to speak. And, if you ask people in the Ivy League, Dartmouth's kind of at the bottom, right? I'm kidding about that, but this is how we think about things. How about MacArthur Genius Grants? Do you realize that there were MacArthur Genius Grants awarded to people from Western Michigan, Western Illinois, Illinois Wesleyan, and Southern Illinois? The Platinum Study, they take a look at 550 leaders in business, government, nonprofits, and politicians. 2/3 came from non-elite institutions. How about Fortune 100 CEOs, Ivy League versus no diploma? 7% went to the Ivy League, 8% had no diploma at all from a college. So I guess I just try and debunk some of these beliefs. So where did this all begin? Well, in the mid 1980s, it's interesting. The U.S. News and World Report was a struggling magazine until they had the brilliant idea of starting to rank colleges and universities. And all of a sudden, that's become what they've been known for. And 40 years later, they're still doing this. So it worked for them from a marketing perspective, but it's had a significant impact on what happens, because what it does is it's beginning to push the envelope of scarcity. The measures that they use are not measures that really help kids succeed or develop. And one of the specific measures that they use is selectivity. And so how do colleges become more selective? Well, here's what they do is they invite more people to apply who they know won't be accepted. And so in order to do that, in order to get your admissions rate down, you're accepting the same number of people, but you begin asking more and more people to apply, and we create this system of scarcity. In 1995, University of Chicago accepted 71% of students who applied. Now it's 6%. You can see what happens, and all of a sudden, this begins to ratchet the pressure up on everybody. And so let's say for these kids who do get in, be careful what you wish for. Sean Aker, who does a ton of writing on happiness, he was also a Harvard professor, freshman psychology. And what he said is, for my freshman class, everybody's so used to being in the top 5th percentile. And he said, half of you now are in the bottom of 50th percentile. How does that feel to you, right? The other thing that Malcolm Gladwell talks about is that if you want to be let's say a chemist and you go to Harvard, the likelihood that you'll be able to be paired with and get on projects is so significantly lower than if you go to the University of Maryland or some other non-selective college, where all of a sudden you are working with you've got access in ways that you wouldn't have access when you are in such a highly competitive, highly elite place. But the case can be made that kids learn more at a Harvard or Northwestern or a Stanford, right? So that makes it worthwhile. Well, let's take a look at the data. Little evidence suggests that selectivity is related to measures of students' self-reported gains in learning, let alone verbal, quantitative, or subject matter competence as measured by standardized test scores. The weight of evidence simply does not support students or policymakers' beliefs that a selective admissions process enhances student learning. What does impact student learning in college? Right? Let's take a look. Guess what? Time spent studying, whether you're at Northern or whether you're at Northwestern. How much you study impacts how you learn. Has nothing to do with the academic institution. This is true regardless of institution for all kinds of students. There is no evidence that students' learning will suffer for attending a less selective college. So they don't learn more if they go there. There's no statistical differences between private and public universities and elite versus non-elite schools, period. That's the Gallup-Purdue study. What does make someone successful? Well, here's the key. 6 of them. Taking a class with a professor that makes learning exciting, working with professors who care about students personally, finding a mentor who encourages you to pursue personal goals, working on a project across several semesters, participating in an internship that applies what you've learned in the classroom, being active in extracurricular activities. These are the 6 things that have been shown to move the dial on whether someone has success post-college. But here's the problem. Only 14% agreed that they were supported by professors who cared about them and made them excited about learning. Only 6% agreed that they had a meaningful internship or job or worked on a long-term project. Only 3% of students experienced all 6 of these. This is where we should be focusing as universities. This is what we should be looking at. Not how selective a college is, not how many people they exclude from their community. The question is, what can the community give to me? So then let's take a look at jobs out after college, because getting out of a highly elite school should be able to help you with your job post-college. Well, let's take a look. So again, the Gallup-Purdue annual report found there's no relationship between college selectivity and workplace engagement or general well-being. You aren't any better off from a well-being perspective or how engaged you are in work, whether you go to an elite versus non-elite school. But then what about the money? Well, I think this is a fascinating study. Dale and Kruger found that college selectivity had no effect on long-term earnings. The same students who were admitted to the selective schools, but who chose to attend less selective schools, did just as well financially later on. So let's say my kids, I live in Evanston, they got into Northwestern, but they couldn't go because of X, Y, and Z, and they ended up going to Northeastern Illinois, North Park, whatever it may be, right? They would end up years later having the same financial profile as the people who did end up going to Northwestern that year. 10 years after graduation, so this is the other piece. Former students of selective colleges report lower job satisfaction than students from less selective colleges. They like their jobs less, and they're more likely to feel underpaid. I should be getting paid more because I went to this selective school. So in summary, job satisfaction, general well-being, learning, and income are all important outcomes of college, but research shows there's no relationship between selectivity, learning, job satisfaction, or general well-being, period. And yet this is what drives all of our schools. This is what drives so much of our parenting. And yet it has no foundation. And so the problem with this is that it actually this pursuit of this high excellence in middle school, elementary school, high school, so we can get into a selective school, ends up having huge impacts on us. So extreme are the admission standards that now kids who manage to get into elite colleges have, by definition, never experienced anything but success. The prospects of not being successful terrifies them and disorients them. The cost of falling short, even temporarily, becomes not merely practical, but as existential. The result is a violent aversion to risk. You have no margin for error, so you avoid the possibility that you will ever make an error. We have kids who are afraid that one small thing will ruin their future. It's just not true. And here's the thing, perfectionists say school, but they don't do any better than their colleagues years later on the job site. Achieving excellence in school often requires mastering old ways of thinking, but building an influential career demands new ways of thinking, of being flexible, of thinking outside the lines instead of saying, what do you want me to do? And I'll do it just the way you want me to. I like this. I got a 2.4 GPA my first semester in college. I thought maybe I wasn't cut out for engineering. Today, I've landed 2 spacecraft on Mars and am now designing one for the moon. STEM is hard for everyone. Grades ultimately aren't what matters. Curiosity and perseverance are. What happens is we're creating an achievement addiction in our young people, especially on the North Shore. I'm not sure if you've heard of the hedonic treadmill. The hedonic treadmill is this idea that we are constantly pursuing achievement. And it's exhausting because we can never get off the treadmill. And the problem is there's no end to it, because if I do get into the AP classes, I've got to get 5s on my AP test. If I get 5s on my AP test, then I need to get into an elite university. And if I get into the elite university, that's not enough. I've got to be in the top 10% of my elite university so I can get into my elite law school. So then I've got to be at the top 10 of 10%, 5% of that, so I can get the clerkship, the elite clerkship. Then I've got to do exceptionally well at that so I can be in the most prestigious law firm. And then I've got to keep going to be in the corner office, to be a partner. It never ends. The human tendency, so this is the thing, is we feel a temporary increase in happiness after we get the raise. It's an increase in happiness after we get the new car. But then all of a sudden, the new car smell goes away, doesn't it? And what happens is we return to baseline. And this is the challenge, is we think that these achievements will keep us up here, but they never do. What happens is we start with a desire, we get it, but then our body adapts. Oh, this is how much money I make. Yes, I'm making this. This is how much prestige I make. And then all of a sudden I'm unhappy again. So I have a new desire to get my boss's job, to get a third house, to whatever it may be. Chasing achievement, but getting nowhere, because there's always more to achieve, always someone achieving more. But the problem is you end up continuing to feel empty and still wanting. I like this. My daughter actually shared this with me. She says, this is like winning a pie eating contest, and the prize is more pie, right? We just keep going. Their success or failure also becomes a reflection on us as parents. That's the other thing. Neither of my kids went to elite colleges, and I knew all this. I've known this for years. They've recently gone off to college, and I felt a little bit of shame. Oh yeah, but your kids are so bright. Where are they going? Right? St. Lawrence University. St. Lawrence University. It's a small school in upstate New York, right? Like it's people. I even feel this because I'm part of this system. Their success or failure also becomes a reflection on our competence as teachers. Believe me, AP teachers are keeping track of where their kids go to college. The more selective, the better. And they also become a reflection on our competence in schools. We've got all these blue ribbon schools. We say this high achievement is something we should all be reaching for. But what we don't realize is the underbelly of this is mental health problems for so many kids. So what does do it? And I'll just say this book highlights a grant study that's been going on for close to 100 years. It's a longitudinal study. They take a look at what makes people happy and successful, really. The strongest predictor for people to maintain their happiness and health throughout the course of their lives was having relationships with satisfying levels of quality and warmth. Period. George Belling said the 75 years, he wrote this a few years ago, and $20 million expended on the grant study points to a straightforward 5-word conclusion. Happiness is love, full stop. It's the quality of our relationships. And yet what we're saying is it's got to be the quality of your transcript that makes you happy and successful. This is where we're getting it wrong. The reality is students who attend selective colleges do not learn more, make more money, or have better careers. The reality is that relationships lead to happiness and health. So something interesting and unexpected happened in the midst of COVID. When schools shut down, Sunya Luthar, who's been doing this research for years on kids in high achieving schools, so she was able to see the pre and post data. She says the well-being of schools and the well-being of students in high achieving schools actually improved. As classes and exams were canceled, grading moved to pass fail, and extracurricular activities ceased, they reported lower levels of stress and anxiety and depression compared with just the year before. Now, I'm not saying they were happy. I'm saying they were healthier. It's not like they were like, oh, thank goodness, I'm so glad my play was canceled. No, they're not saying that. But the lower stress levels impacted their mental health. I'd work with kids and they would say, I hate online learning, but I love that we don't have homework. And you know what parents would say? They'd say, I'm glad the first conversation I have with my kid is not what homework do you have, but what game do we want to play tonight? Do you want to walk the dog? All of a sudden, and this is the building of relationships, kids got an hour more sleep during COVID. Is that a big deal? Yes, if you take a look at attention deficit disorder, symptoms of ADHD, obesity, behavior problems, academic problems, and social skills, significantly impacted by an hour less of sleep. Our kids are overscheduled. It's not just in school, it's outside of school. It's the three travel teams they're on and all of the other activities. What that means is us as parents are overstressed and focused on, oh my gosh, who's got the snack? Do we need shin pads or helmets for this afternoon? Who's got transportation? Who's going to pick the kids up because it's not just the travel team practice, it's the training you've got to do to make the travel team and the 6 a.m. batting practice, right? It's all of these things. It's not just kids who are overwhelmed by this idea that we need to achieve. It's parents as well. If I said to my wife, and Sharon, you know my wife, if I said to her, hey, I've got an idea for this year, I'm going to play pickup basketball. I'm going to wake up at 4:30, play pickup basketball with my buddies from 5:30 to 7 o'clock, and then I'm going to work a full day's work, but I'm going to get out early, so I'm going to work right through lunch, so I'm going to be in a garage band with my buddies, so we can play some gigs on the weekends. And then when I come home, I'm not going to have time to sit down and have dinner, but I'll warm my food up and I'll go into my office and I'll do my email and stuff until I fall asleep. What do you think she'd say? She'd say, number one, that's not healthy. But number two, she'd say, the divorce papers will be waiting for you in that fine office of yours because I don't want to live with someone who has that life. And yet, isn't this the life that we've set out for our kids as the ideal of what it means? It means that I'm going to have my child be in diving on the swim team, and then they're going to get to school and they're going to have to practice early, and then we're going to get them to they're going to go to school, but they're going to take 4 AP classes, so they've got to skip through their lunches, and then they're going to be in the play, which is rehearses after school, and then they've got 3.5 hours of homework every night, and then repeat and repeat and repeat. See, the thing is that we learned that mental health problems went down when we took away all that stress. And yet what Luther found was these improvements were short-lived. Beginning in the fall of 2020, as schoolwork ramped back up, the mental health of adolescents returned to pre-pandemic levels or worse. See, COVID did shine a light on our communities. And what did we learn from this? So David Foster Wallace, he gave the commencement address at Kenyon College in 2005, and he told this story. He said there are these two young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And the two young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and says, "What the hell's water?" The immediate point of the fish story is that the most obvious, ubiquitous, important realities are often the ones that are hardest to see and talk about. And I think the pressure we're putting on our kids and the impact on their mental health is hard for us to talk about because it's something that we are all living in. We had a chance for a little bit of time to be out of the water, and kids got healthier. But now that we know, what will we do? All right, and then that's it for me for today. I'll take whatever questions, and I can stay on as long. Sorry that was a little bit more than 20 minutes, but I've got a book coming out. If you want to pre-order it, feel free. I'd love it. But this is it's about how can we rethink how we support kids through the power of community as opposed to through this power of achievement. All right, so I'm gonna end there. And I'll stop for any questions or comments or reactions to that. That was a lot in a little bit of time.
I would just like to say thank you very much for this presentation. I have not been part of this before, and I do not have children or grandchildren, but I put this back to when I was in college. And it was very interesting. And I didn't expect to go to college, but I ended up at Purdue, not in engineering, but it was very competitive. But I was completely independent, and I was a little older when I went to college. So I didn't have a lot of these preset notions.
Yeah.
So I did not, I can see this all around me though. And people who have children and grandchildren, it's really sad. And some of them escape it. But thank you so much. It was very enlightening today.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Thank you for those comments.
Yes, yes.
Jill, yeah. If you haven't changed your name, that's okay. Just maybe indicate who you are. So because everyone is Jillian.
My name. Oh, I didn't know what I was. I didn't know what my label was, but that's my alias. But my real name is Mary Holcomb, and
Hi, Mary.
I was part of the Barrington Rotary Club. So I would say the North Shore does not have the monopoly on this.
Right. Well,
it's the same thing.
I totally agree, and thank you, Mary.
I think you know, there's no disagreement with what's being said, and I think everybody should know some of this. More people should certainly know the research, but what you do about it, because this is the culture we live in, and what does concern me right now also is the finger pointing that parents get. And I think the generation of the people here on this call, we've been there, we've done it. Not everybody, I guess, but I do think in mental health there is a significant amount of finger pointing at parents, and I don't think it's healthy. And I think the Surgeon General coming out and saying parenting today is very stressful is quite true. I once heard, it was at a Rotary meeting actually, it was a presentation on mental health. Someone asked, what is causing so much suicide in our young people today? And the speaker, to her credit, said, I don't know. And someone in the audience who is in mental health and a religious leader said, well, these parents, and I have faith. And I think that's a too common response. Mental illness does exist, and we wouldn't turn to a parent, to a 16-year-old dying of cancer and say, well, these parents, and I have faith. And I think the understanding of mental health and all the things that contribute really needs to be looked at. And I appreciate what you brought up. I particularly appreciate the statistics and research behind it. But I think we all need to be upstanding about this and say something when we can. And it's tough. But this finger pointing at parents, God, it's really hard work. Our generation knows it. It's a lot harder with the younger generation. You're competing with things like social media. And so anyway, I'm obviously up on my
well, I couldn't agree with you more. I guess my hope is, the point is that we're all part of this system.
I think so.
And I think that real estate agents want school scores to be higher so that they can get more. Like we're all in cahoots on this, right? And I think that as parents, we believe that this is the key. As educators, we believe, the more rigor,
better.
the better. The thing that's interesting is, if you take a look at, for instance, Finland, kids in Finland have 2.7 hours, actually 2.9 hours of homework per week. In America, it's 2.7 hours per night.
And they also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, there's so many reasons, right? But all I'm saying is that there's so many different ways. They get an hour more quiet downtime during the school day, teachers and students. And so, and it's not like they used to be number 1 in the world, now they're like 13, but we're like 19. We don't need all of this in order to have our kids be successful, or even to learn. It can take away from the learning.
Yeah. I really appreciate what you've had to say. I wish we could get the message out to more people. Thank you.
Of course. I wanted to just get Kevin, I think that you had I saw a question come up that I thought was a really good one. The fine line between accountability and pressure to perform. What I would say is, what we want to encourage is engagement more than anything. And that when engaged, we perform better than when we're not engaged. And what we know is that that a system that's highly competitive, I think for sports, there's good competition and then there's toxic competition. And I think that what we've done is we've created systems of scarcity where more and more kids are trying out at younger and younger age for things that are adult organized and adult focused. I think that it's important for us. I think it's important for kids to be able to go out and play games and organize themselves. And I'm not sure if you guys have read The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, but a lot of his book talks about social media, and I feel like he overplays that hand a little bit. But the part that I really resonated with is that what we want to do is we want to create kids with opportunities to experience stress and overcome it without too much adult intervention. It's important for us to have high expectations, for kids to know that we believe in them. There's another great book out there that I think might get at your question, Kevin. It's called 10 to 25 by David Yeager. And what he talks about is we need to have high expectations, but we also need to have support that'll match kids being able to get to those expectations. And there are some kids, like my daughter, everything came easy to her. She was able to navigate the intensity of the school system in Evanston pretty easily. For my son, who had struggled with executive functioning problems, it all moved too quickly. Really smart kid, but he couldn't keep up. And I think what's happening, what we're asking eighth graders and freshmen to do now are what we would have expected juniors and seniors 30 and 40 years ago to do. And their brains just aren't ready for it. And so what I would say is, how can we have high expectations, but also match? I've got a friend who talks about developmental empathy. Match where they're at developmentally. Some kids can handle the complexity and and these busy schedules. Many people can't. And so, and when you can't, there's a world of shame that ends up coming down on you because you didn't make the team, because you couldn't practice as much, because you struggle to sit down and do all this homework at night, because your brain isn't able to organize all the steps to a project in eighth grade. And your classmate and a couple of your classmates can. What we want to do is match the level of support we give to kids with their brain's development and where they're at. And focus less on what grade they're having and more on how engaged they are, and how much they and their ability to produce work that they can feel good and proud of.
Doug, Doug, you're making me think of so many things. And one is a filing cabinet full of writings that I know you're familiar with.
Yeah.
One question I asked a group of students, and they weren't all North Shore. There were 15 high schools in our area. 15 high schools, was what would make it better? And a couple of these weren't so well written, but the point was similar. One response was, I wish parents could be in our place. I wish we could have a take your parent to school day. Which addresses much of what you said about school. But what I jotted down was, I heard a comedian the other night joking, it's somebody we all know, and I don't remember if it was Seinfeld or somebody. It was an old YouTube, saying that when I grew up, my parents didn't know, so I lived on sugar, and he said I could have gone flying through the air because we didn't have seatbelts and so forth. Yeah. But it made me think of societal norms of educating them, not so much the children, but parents, those little Einstein parents, in to what you're a mental health Dr. Spock for parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as I jotted down that question when you were speaking, I realized we can't say go out and play like my parents did, because times are different, society is different, and we're living in a relatively safe neighborhood. This is a big societal problem. I think it's more than just get into good schools. They think that's important because their parents think it's important.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you, it's what you'll find is parents who I think honestly don't care where their child goes to school or what they end up doing. Just stepping into these schools, you really are breathing the air of high achievement, and the way kids compare themselves to one another. There's this constant social comparison that happens. And it's an interesting, one other thought that I just wanted to share that you mentioned is that what we know is that this is stressful for our well-resourced families, right? The families that can, spend their summers traveling to all of these medium-sized Midwestern cities to baseball tournaments and other things, and get the extra coaching and all of that. But people in lower resourced communities still feel that same pressure that this is what I should be doing. And they're a single family parent. And then there's hormones. Yes, Kevin, thank you.
And then there's oh good. When they're going, parents as well. Where is your child going to school?
Yeah.
An Ivy. Oh, how nice. Very good. Yeah. You did a good job.
Yes.
There is that. It's the societal norm. We don't measure for the success, the Ron Taffel and the second family. We're not thinking about any of that.
Yeah.
At this point. And all I know, the thing that gives me hope is smoking.
Yeah.
We changed a societal norm of
But I'd say
ashtrays on every dinner
drinking and
table.
driving as well has really shifted in the
Mhm,
last 30 or
mhm.
40 years.
And it would take a leader like yourself and a team of leaders to do any shifting in this. Look how much trouble and time it took to deal with smoking. But wow, you don't walk into a restaurant anymore and see ashtrays on the table.
No, no.
So I do have a question, and it always sounds like a cliche when we say that Rotarians are people of action, but I think you have done an excellent job of identifying the problem, and the audience has chimed in with, this has resonated with them at whatever level of their experience. So where do you go from here? How do you bring the educators in? How do you bring the parents in to, as Sharon just alluded to, take the cigarette ashtrays off the tables? But
Yeah.
where do you start? I think obviously getting the word out, as your presentation has demonstrated, would be great, and we can certainly make that available to people through our district website and the YouTube and all that. But seriously, how do we move the needle a little bit? Because everybody on this call at some level is experiencing this.
Well, it's interesting, and this gets back to a little bit of what you were saying, Sharon, is that in 2019, when that data first came out, I would say to districts, I want to talk about this, and like, oh, don't talk about that. Don't say that being in a high achieving school impacts kids' mental health. That's our business, right? And now I've got administrators and school board. I gave a similar talk at the Illinois School Board Association, and people are desperate for these messages now. And so I would say that's I agree, Josh. We're slowly beginning to recognize this. And then the other piece I would say is I think attending school board meetings. It's interesting when I read this book by oh gosh, what's his name? It's on poverty by Matthew, and I can't remember his last name, but he talked about if you want to change the housing crisis, go to zoning meetings.
Mhm.
And I feel the same about this, is that if we really want to do this, we've got to go into board meetings and say, yeah, no, we're not we don't want to hear about your test scores. We want to hear about what you're doing because what we know, and this is the piece that's so important and is upstream of all of this, is if we want kids to learn and get better test scores and be more engaged and have fewer mental health problems, we embed them in communities of belonging. But as we work on rigor, we take less time to help kids connect. And so we are defeating ourselves. But what are we doing to help kids belong instead of, I don't want to hear your test scores? So go ahead, Sharon. I know you're.
Yeah, I'm chomping at the bit because Mary said something that really sparked a thought. It's one of the reasons, maybe the reason I'm involved in Rotary, is I'm impressed with the idea of one organization that is in every small town and large city in the world. In the world, large enough, my understanding is large enough to support a school is large enough to have a Rotary Club. And I have visited Rotary Clubs in other countries, small from the Pacific Islands to sophisticated places in Europe. What if there were a mental health task force of folks? You and I'm looking at Josh. I just looked up your title on LinkedIn, trauma specialist. What if
He lives this work every single day. I love it.
What if the Midwest, the little portion we are right here, our little zip codes of 600, had a to-do list, something that could be applicable to a Rotary meeting of just regular moms and dads, folks who have any and every line of work and of different ages, but to something to do I'm not going to go to a zoning board meeting. Am I going to a school board meeting? I've gone and that's nice. And where's my car and go home? It's not going to change my parenting skills. But if I had a reminder of what you talked about today available, maybe not shoved down my throat every day, but if I had something on my district website of a little to-do list of things to do other than things to say other than what's your homework tonight? How well did you do on the test? Oh, that's good. Now you achieved. You got a good. You got an attaboy. How else to give your kids attaboys and girls for things other than producing? Because we do what we know.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I saw Josh's comment, and I haven't pulled it up, but Josh mentioned self-regulation and emotional regulation. I guess the thing that we want to do is offer alternatives to this
And share them and
if you-
share them. It's like you can say regulation. Regular parents don't know what that means and don't know how to do that. Not that I wouldn't want to.
That's why
I
you
don't
want them to
know
have
how.
my book in their hands, Sharon.
I know.
That's why.
I just
but
I'm
I do
sort of
think
multitasking and buying it.
I do think that there is a that we want to be able to provide people instead of just saying don't do this. It's like, what does this look like? What is parenting? What does a different kind of parenting look like? What would we emphasize? How would we do that? And so I love that. I love the spirit of that. And I think the same thing in schools is what does a classroom look like if our endpoint isn't getting higher, getting higher grades on this or that.
You know what we're doing next month on this first Monday is we're having, you guys might know Dan Postian. He's a social worker and
Yeah.
he's
Oh yeah, I know Dan well. Yes.
Okay.
Tell him I said hello.
Well, you can tell him yourself and tune in next Monday. We've got a student from Stevenson who actually wrote one of the essays on the damage of social media. And I think she could come up against, what's his name? Jonathan Haidt, 15 years old. Good student at Stevenson will be addressing that topic. And I knew enough not to just leave her alone on leading a presentation like this. So she's doing it jointly with a professional from a different school system. And it will be she and Dan will be talking about social media. How about you guys having a team, something that's available to Rotary clubs, to regular folks, a TV station, something that you could initiate? I mean, I could see this on Channel 11. I could see a how-to. I could see a Dr. Spock happening at the really grassroots level, unmanicured grassroots of, even if it's a conversation with a team that is moderated and properly handled. But taking that thought of Sophia and Dan next on January 6th, of taking a look at them, and I have no idea what they're scripting. I know they're communicating with each other and they're going to meet somewhere and talk about planning their half hour, their presentation. What if some of you guys got together? Is it a workable thought?
I'm always wanting to get together with folks who are invested in this. Absolutely.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll send you the list. You don't even need contact information. You know them all. But I can send you a list of who we've got in our area presenting on this topic. And they're people of different age levels and different topics and so forth. But mental health individuals in District 6440 who might share something, I don't know, once on a regular basis with another district, so that some good intentions don't just die as good intentions.
Right.
I love
So
it.
Kevin has his hand up, and why don't we start with you, Kevin?
Thank you. Yeah, there's well, as with everything in psychology, there's a whole lot to unpackage in every half sentence, right? my comment about hormones is only half in jest, right? Because every time you start talking about the pressures of life, and then there's the interpersonal things, there's the interwebs, as we call it, and the trolls and everything that kids are, the exposures there, and overwhelming exposures, the tidal wave. But then I go back to, what is I talk about expectations versus pressure in all these things. Here's a question, and it's not necessarily rhetorical. What is wrong with a PhD taxi cab driver, if that's what they want to be doing?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I would say
Nothing.
right. Yeah, what I would say would be, I guess the piece for me about that would be, they got their PhD for some reason, right? And I would just want, I guess for me, if they got their PhD in chemistry and were like, no, I hate all the jobs related to chemistry, this is just a big mistake, I love driving a cab, that's great. But so I guess what I would say is there's a passion. If you're going to get a PhD, hopefully there's a passion behind that. And the piece is, could that passion be met with cab driving? I would say absolutely. That would be wonderful. And I would just want to make sure that those, if they got a PhD in writing, I've always thought that cab drivers should write books about the people,
no doubt,
because they've got so many stories, right?
It's like bartenders, right?
Exactly, yeah.
In every profession, there's a level of what else could this be, I think.
Yep.
And, and my signature for years has been remain curious, because
Yeah.
I have no, if someone has a bunch of letters after their name, that's great. But what are you as a human being is all those pieces put
I
together.
agree.
And this goes back into what our clubs are doing, and what is the pressure in the academic environment, and what's acceptable in their milieu and in their family. And what is tolerance about? Well, tolerance is accepting what your children are. And this gets into the whole, the current wave of gender acknowledgement and all these other things. What is parenting really? It's about accepting your child for where they want to go, but maintaining the accountability, allowing them to explore, because that's what kids do, and be curious. And some of the things our clubs do right now are very supportive of that. And I'll give a class example, a perfect example. One of our clubs, actually more than one of our clubs, several of our clubs provide trade toolkits for kids who don't want to go to college but want to go into the trades, right?
Yeah.
One of my son's classmates, coming out of a blue ribbon schools, right? And what are the check the boxes for blue ribbon schools? Well, academics and acceptance to colleges, right?
Yeah.
Well, this one close friend of his is not going to college, is going to trade school and doing community college so he can open up his own business. And the guy's probably going to be a millionaire in 5 years, right?
Yeah.
But what's the measure there? He's curious. He loves what he's doing. He wants to do that. Had no interest in going to an institution. I don't even know what his grades are. I don't know if he's that academically inclined, but he's doing what he needs to do. And that takes a supportive environment at home. And his mental health state is probably, when you start thinking about that, it's very anecdotal. I could say all I want about it, but I would assume that his mental health state is better than some of the kids who are really digging in based on the pressures to go where, get that at said Ivy League or whatever school. I think it's fascinating. I think that our clubs are already doing that. And I, adding all these different pieces. One of the things that comes to mind when we talk about these programs, and we all in this room know this, you can build the trough, you can drag the horse there, but is the horse going to drink that water? And that's the challenge with so many of these families. So you got to provide incentive-based resources or tools that they see some reward to, because just creating a program and giving it to them, attendance is low, as we see again and again. But thank you so much anyway, Doug. Extraordinary material. Really appreciate it. Appreciate you.
Great. There's a one quote I just want to share real quick that I think gets at Mariana's and Mary's and your comment. And there's research that says that 90% of parents say that they communicate to their kids that they value caring and kindness over achievement. Then they asked the kids, and the kids said, 81% of kids said my parents value achievement over being caring and kind.
Reality.
And I think that people are doing that. It's well-meaning, right? So that we can, and that's where I believe that it's about our societies. We can say all we want as parents. We can but we're embedded in a society and a culture that's encouraging all of this. So even in our best moments, and even trying to do all of the right things, it can be really hard for kids to internalize those messages that we're hoping they would get.
We could probably talk for the rest of the day.
I'm up for it, Mary.
But I think we'll cut it off now.
All right. Fair enough.
So many great ideas I can see burgeoning here in the conversation, from reaching out to our Rotarians in District 6440 who are in education, reaching out to the districts, the elementary, even the preschools, the primary schools, and trying to bring them in, engage them, use our resources to get the word out and to engage parents and teachers and grandparents and everyone that has a stake in this going forward. So I thank you. And thank you again, Sharon, for connecting us with Doug today. And we look forward to next month's meeting in January, which I want to say is the 2nd. But
How about Oprah starting the whole birth of book clubs again? Yeah, I'm not finished. Doug will talk.
It sounds great.
Thank you.
Of course.
First I'll read the book. Thank you very much for a great presentation.
very, very good.
And I'm grateful
really appreciate it.
to speak
Thank
to
you.
such
And
a
thank
great
you, Jillian,
organization. Thank you.
And thank you, Jillian, for organizing us and keeping us on track and I know it'll be a great editing job.
You're welcome.
Thank
And
you.
the first Monday of January is the 6th, January 6th.
Oh, thank goodness.
And thank all of you for my personal help with technology.
Thank you. And happy
Thank you.
birthday, Sharon.
Oh,
Oh, happy birthday.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.